Hello and welcome to another broadcast from the Truth Proof Studios. So, welcome, Paul, to tonight's show. And how was the week been for you?
Oh, it's been hectic, Les. It's been absolutely full on. I've not been back long. I've been 1 second, Les. Let's just. I've been looking at some information that somebody sent me earlier today, and I've been searching around this woodland looking for clues to what they told me. But we'll get to that. We'll probably cover that next week. But yeah, it's been a good week. It's been busy, and I'm looking forward to talking to our guests tonight.
Yeah, and between us, I know we've got some filming lined up within the next couple of weeks. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. We'll end up in North Yorkshire once again, and we might be going towards Rosedale if anybody knows that area. And we've the next project that we're working on. It might have a working title of Wolflands 2, but it won't be Wolflands 2. We know it won't ultimately finish on that because the net's spreading out, and we might bring Wolflands into suburbia. We shall see. We've got some incredible reports.
Right. So I've got to welcome everybody to tonight's live stream. As I said earlier, a few people in the chat. Paula, I don't know if you want to go through some name checks.
Oh, let's have a look here. Well, as usual, we've got Alison doing moderating for us. I don't know if Sky is. We've got Skygaze Internal, Annie French, Ralph Winter. Let me get my glasses a bit closer. Joel Burgess, Diane Farrell, Kat, Patricia Wright Adams, hi Pat. I hope you're feeling better. Absolute Rivington Pike, Warren Hardcastle, UFO Nut. I think there's plenty of them. I might class myself as one of them, but all good. And there's loads of names there that I've missed, people, and there's no slant on you. We'll get to you at some point during tonight's live stream, and thank you.
And please like, share, click the bell button, and everything else you can do on YouTube to promote this stream tonight. And also, as Paul said, Alison's doing the moderating tonight, and she'll be sending any questions through. And any questions you may have, it may be a little bit lean for us to get some in tonight, but we'll try our best. Please put all your questions in caps. So on that note, Paul, I'll let you introduce the show.
Thank you. Hi guys, and what can I say? We both men been on Truth Proof live stream before. Both men absolutely nail it with everything that they do within field of unexplained phenomena. So we've got Barry Fizgerald, Steve Mera. Barry's written, I believe, 9 books, although I could be corrected, it might be 10 or 11 by now. And covered just about everything within the field, and spoken and lectured, appeared on TV programs around the world. And, likewise, Steve Mera, author, researcher, international lecturer. I think, are you co-producer of Phenomena magazine, which is probably the largest online paranormal magazine in the world? I'm sure Steve will correct me if I'm wrong. I could go on, and I'm not going to do that. Steve, Barry, welcome.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much, Paul.
No, honestly, it really would. We'd have spent 10 minutes going through all that, because I looked today and absolutely loads and loads. You've spoken everywhere, pair of you. But it's not going to be solely about the awakening tonight, but I'd love to share with our listeners and anybody else that listens after this tonight what's happening, what's going to be happening at the Awakening Conference, the Awakening Expo 2023. And over to you, Steve. Just open it up.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks, Paul. So we've got this is our big event, which we take place once every year. We do some smaller events, as you know, throughout the year, but we always make sure we do one very large event in Manchester, in Trafford Park, Manchester, UK, each and every year. This year is a little bit special because we are hosting the Forbidden Knowledge, or should we say 4BK World Tour for Billy Carson. So it's some of it is Billy's show, some of it is ours. It's a little bit different this year. Billy's got his own guests coming to Awakening. We have obviously our guests as well. So we've got more people actually coming this year than we normally would do, which is good and exciting. And this is why we've actually done it for 2.5 days, because normally we only do it for 1.5 days. The Friday from say 4 o'clock onwards, and the full Saturday. But we're also doing the full Sunday as well, just to pack everybody in, to be honest with you. And we've got a great lineup of speakers. We have Daryl Sims, who's going to be coming along with some really interesting evidence. And he's a little bit like us, Paul. You know, he kind of sits on the fence, but he's not willing to accept that all this love and light, because he has dealt with numerous cases, many cases around the world where it seems to oppose that belief. However, on the opposite end, we bring Mary Rodwell in as well from Australia, and of course, you know, she is more about the contactee experiences, those people that don't seem to have much incidents taking place with them, which I refer to as a negative experience. So it's kind of quite balanced there, as you can imagine. We have James Fox, who's going to be attending, and he's going to be screening one of his movies live to the audience, and he's going to be doing a lecture as well about his work and what comes next. I mean, I know James has always been very, very interested in the Colares UFO incident. I mean, you know what, he's just been, the last one he did was in Brazil, and a fascinating take on the incidents that took place there some years back. And he's going to be talking about some of the things he's going to be looking forward to, what's coming next, what's the new projects, and of course some of the challenges that we didn't get to hear about whilst doing this type of work, because we always set for challenges, you know. Also, we have yourself who'll be there, obviously, and talking about an update on your investigations and the strange cryptid sightings, UFOs, paranormal, you know, kind of all rolls into one. Barry will be there, and I believe Barry's presenting a new lecture, aren't you, Barry?
Yeah, that's right. It's a combined approach at what I've been uncovering here in Ireland in relation to our ancestors and how they were communicating with these things beyond the veil, and how that information all came to be on my desk. It was quite an experience, and really it draws a focusing light on this image that we tend to see on a global scale, this image of what we would call the handbag. What is this that appears, this engraving that appears on the walls of not only Syria and Iraq, but also into the Americas as well? What is it? What does it reference? And I think we have cracked it, what it actually is.
As Steve were talking then, Barry, and as you were talking, it were hard not to kind of stop and pull up the Colares UFO. I'm thinking, tell us a little bit about that. What do you? But and all these other bits, and then you were talking about the ancient connection there, Barry, and you think to yourself, and the ancients did have this connection. We know this, and not just three people on this screen now know this, but it also tells us that this phenomena, this intelligence, whatever it is, can be connected, can be interacted with without modern technology. It's consciousness and intent and that desire to, you look at the phenomena and the phenomena looks back at you. I think we just touched on it before we started this, Barry, didn't we? But sorry, I put it in, but yeah,
you're quite all right. But yet, there are huge connections. Our ancestors were dealing with this phenomena. And that was something that they had left us the notes, and going all the way back to Sumeria, we've got the clay tablets, which now artificial intelligence is translating these clay tablets now at record speeds. My only gripe with this is we need to be very, very careful of artificial intelligence, because we can see its manipulation when creating stories, that it can create and give you four truths and give you one lie in between. And that we need to be very, very, very careful of, because it seems it's performing in the way that Ouija boards do. So is artificial intelligence the new Ouija board? Who knows? Time will tell.
What a brilliant analogy, and you're right. And could it advance to such a stage? And I know that's what you've just alluded to, that it's actually lying to us and leading us down the wrong path. And then we've got to ask ourselves, to what end? What is that, the artificial intelligence end game? Because
artificial intelligence has its benefits. It is absolutely tremendous, but we need to make sure that it's governed.
Yeah.
So I know Barry's going to be delivering a very fascinating lecture. I'm looking forward to seeing it. But you know what? Anything that comes out from Barry or comes out from Ireland, that place is saturated in phenomena. And I can say that absolutely from witnessing it. I would never have believed it otherwise. But yeah, that is I would say it's the capital. For me, I mean, I'm after traveling all over the world. It's got to be the capital for phenomena as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
But it's very discreet in Ireland. You know, it's very quiet and creeps up on you, and you know, and yeah, it can be a little bit startling, I have to say. But people are going to be in for a real treat with that particular lecture.
So let's just stay with Ireland just for a moment. The local people, who obviously you're familiar with a lot of them, or many of them. How many know about the unexplained events, but just close down, say nothing?
Oh,
people sat on lots and lots of information that never gets spoken about.
Huge amounts of information is not communicated. It used to be back in the day we had these ceilidh houses. It was places where the community came together, and yes, there was a few bottles of poaching that disappeared during the night. There was music, but there was also story. And that was the place where the stories were being shared. And because of particular policies from the European Union and things like that, those ceilidh houses started to die out until it's non-existent now. And that in a way is sad, because those interactions that people are having, you're right, they're not communicating. And part of that is because of the old religious rhetoric that Ireland still has a certain amount of sway to, especially the older generation. And that controlling aspect is, you had the experience, but don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. You might bring it back on yourself. That still occurs today. Now, I know that there's a place in the next county, and the amount of UFO phenomena that is occurring there is wicked. And between cattle being moved from fields to other fields, from people who are driving their cars, and this huge orange orb appears over the top of their vehicle. All of this is all happening in this small key area, but the locals don't want to talk about it in case they start drawing strange people into the area to investigate. Strange
people, or do they also think that they might be evoking the phenomenon and bringing it onto themselves in some instances?
Not so much that. No, I think it's just the fact that they don't really want strangers into the area.
Yeah.
People like me snooping around.
It's true, and you said it, not me, because I was looking into the big cats in North Yorkshire, and a friend of ours, Chris Wright, who works around that area quite a lot, and he gets to remote farms and all over the place, and he started talking about them, and they knew about me, and they didn't want me snooping around and asking. And I'm quite honestly, I'll talk about anything, but if somebody says to me, do not disclose this location, do not say, that's what they get. But we can also understand that these people don't know you, Barry, you, Steve, or me, so they're not willing to take that risk, are they? And that's, at times you can understand it. Obviously I want to touch on a few more, loads more things, but what else can we expect from the awakening, Steve?
Yeah, absolutely. We have Mohammed Ibrahim. Now, Mohammed has been working in Egypt. He lives in Egypt. He has one of the most significant tours around Egypt, but he's been working there for quite a number of years now. And he's going to be talking about some of the things that, you don't get to hear about, you don't get to see. Stuff he's come across, some crazy stuff, to be honest with you, which just doesn't see the light of day at all. Everybody's just focused on the pyramids at Giza, you know, but he's going to be talking about some of those things that, you know, are out there and are happening, and really we don't get to hear about that sort of stuff. So that's going to be interesting. That'll be his first time at Awakenings disclosing this information. Johnny Enoch will be joining us again, and he'll be talking about some of the more mysterious ancient sites and things like that, which should also be good. And we have Melissa Tittle coming along. Melissa Tittle, who also works with Ben Hansen on, what was it, UFO Witness, I think the TV show was called. Melissa's been involved in a number of television shows. She's also a producer herself. And she was involved also heavily in Ancient Aliens, a TV series. And she's going to be coming along and doing a lecture. Caroline Corey will be there as well, and she's also associated to the new documentary, A Tear in the Sky. This is an attempt to scientifically investigate what is referred to as the UAP phenomena now. And there's some interesting things, you know, which in developments, which is leading the way in some further research there. So she'll be coming along and doing a talk. And then, of course, we have our guest speaker who'll be coming along, and celebrity Craig Charles. And most people will know him from Red Dwarf. Craig is also interested in the subject of ufology and was involved in a television show. First season was completed not too long ago, called UFO Investigation. And it just kind of generalized, looked at numerous different high-profile UFO incidents around the world, which he's become very interested in. So Craig will be joining us. We also have a surprise as another celebrity will be the attendance. Not going to give that away as yet. Billy Carson will be there, along with his partner Elizabeth. Both will be conducting lectures at the event, and there's probably about another 10 varied lectures, rather than me just going through them all.
No, he's fine, Steve.
I think what's probably best is, you know, if you can go onto the Phenomena Magazine's website, which is phenomenamagazine.co.uk, and just go straight across to the right-hand side and select Awakenings, there's a full details of all what's going on there over the 2.5 days, all the lecturers throughout Hangar 1, Hangar 2, and Hangar 3. We have a very large area where there's going to be quite a number of stalls. So if anybody's out there wants to come along with a stall, then simply just get in touch. That's not a problem. We have a number of small attractions there, and photo opportunities and lots of things. We try and make it a family event.
Yeah, absolutely fabulous. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, as I know Barry will be. But I just picked up on what it James Fox, A Tear in the Sky. Who produced that one?
A Tear in the Sky was done by Caroline Corey. And
okay, I'm just curious the title, because I know nothing about the film. But when we used to go onto the Wolds, the East Yorkshire Wolds, because it's still active up there. But I'm like, when I worked on building sites, I followed the money. I'm following the activity now, if that makes sense, and it's more active up on these cliff tops. But when we used to go onto the Wolds quite a lot, when these lights presented these strange and orange primarily, I know you've talked about on the huge orange light earlier, Barry, but I commented that it was almost like we were looking at a cartoon. It didn't look like it belonged. As you're looking at it, it looked like it had been painted onto sky. And silly analogy, I know, but when I listen to you just then and say a tear in the sky, it almost gives you the image that you're looking at something else beyond the tear. You know, I don't know what the sort of idea of the title is.
Yeah, I mean, the Tear in the Sky is because it focuses on a certain location near Catalina Island, where the UAP phenomena seemingly manifests in key locations. For sure, it's like they have an agenda in certain locations, and for a year or half a year, for an example, there'll just suddenly be a lot of incidents taking place in that location where these things are seemingly manifesting and traveling faster than the human eye, which equipment can actually track now at tremendous speeds. So that's quite interesting. And I think she refers to Tear in the Sky because it's very localized. to a particular area where these things seemingly are just appearing from and disappearing from. So you could say that they come in to our reality somehow, and then they seem to vacate our reality. And these locations seem to be key areas where phenomena seems to be strife for certain lengths of time, and until they probably focus somewhere else.
And as Barry will, I hope he might agree, they do die down, but you always know they've got the potential, or they're going to actually start like a volcano. They're going to activate again, and that's what happens. You mentioned Egypt earlier, and I don't mean let's get into this guy's lecture, but people from other countries, Egypt, do they discuss the phenomena on the same level? Are we dealing with a different phenomena, or is it just different culture discussing the same thing?
It's a really good question, because I was really intrigued when I first met him. He came over to our studios to do a TV series, and I spent about a week and a half with him. And of course, as you do, you talk and you share information. And because he has a close relationship with a very high-ranking official in Egypt, he manages to get to places where you wouldn't normally get. I mean, literally, you go down the road, you're going to get stopped. If you haven't got a warrant, you haven't got some sort of certification to say you're allowed to go down that road, these guys with guns out just say, turn around, go back. And that's what happens. I mean, people can visit Egypt all day long, and the geese, and it's become very tourism. It's very customized for tourists. You step out of that area, Paul, you're faced with these guys, armed guys, blocked off roads. You can't get to certain places. You've got to have permission, and luckily for him, he has had permissions to get to certain places and find out things. And one of the craziest things he told me is that there's a presence still there of the US military at one particular place in Egypt where these caves are. And they have lined up there several tanks, American tanks, and they're just pointing at this cave. And you just sit pointing at this cave all day. He said, I don't know what goes on there. He said, nobody's talking about it, but I tell you what, it's a hell of a sight to just see them sat there pointing towards this cave. God knows what they're expecting to come out of that thing. But they've been there for quite some time. You can't get any closer. Nobody's talking, but he got close enough to see what was happening. And that's just one of many things. I mean, is the Black Pyramid there? I mean, we don't hear about the Black Pyramid in Egypt simply because it's not a touring site. It's not a location people will go to or you're allowed to go to. And that's simply because the top part of this pyramid is melted. It is literally, it's petrified. It's the stone is melted from the top down. And nobody knows how that can happen. And it's charred the stone black. The bottom part of the pyramid is still intact. But you won't get there to kind of investigate or see these things. Very rarely we actually even see an image pop up on the internet or even in a book. So these are just a few of the things that are out there. You don't get to hear about.
Lots of sacred sites that we'll never get to see. And Barry, you're doing some new investigations on, is it Castle Island?
Yeah, it's a small island not far from where I live. And it has got an extensive history that stems back thousands of years. And the archaeologists have been working on the island now for several years, coming back and forth, and they're actually there at the minute. I'm hoping to look for a specific piece that will tie all the history together. And this island, there's been a huge amount of life lost at this place. Tragedy befalls anyone who lives on that particular island. And one example, of course, is that of a lightning bolt hitting the island and killing over 300 people. That's just one instance. And looking at the old manuscripts, there is a mention of even ghosts on the island over 1,000 years ago. They're mentioned in those papers. And I interviewed a guy 2 years ago, and he had the displeasure, along with his partner, of rowing a boat behind the island, and it was late in the year, and he was caught in a storm, but he was also caught by two particular large creatures that rose from the water and trapped the boat. Now, these we can identify as the ancient gods of Ireland. These are the serpents, the giant serpents that were known to whisper the wisdom of the ancients. And here is this guy in the modern age fighting for his life to try and get back to shore as these things circle the boat. Also, several months after that particular event, we also have UFOs that were filmed to the rear of the island. So this place is really shaping up to be a particular, it's almost like an Irish skinwalker.
Yeah.
And just recently, I discovered this triangular formation on one of the headlands, and which is 276 feet across, with the trees dead on the inside. And having a scientist there, he done some testing for background radiation, and we discovered that the trees that are dead are having a larger signature of radiation than those that are not. But there's also a line that's formed from that, a line we can see. Not only can we see the triangular formation on satellite images, but there's also this particular trajectory line that we have followed. And at each point of those lines, we find the origins of the Shining Ones, the Nordics, the Palladians. Call them what you want. These particular Shining Ones appear at both ends of this line. So it's really developing into something, a wonderful story, and where it will end, who knows? As I say, the archaeologists are there now; they're digging now, and what they will uncover and what we will uncover is another thing, because the castle that remains on the island, the orientation, also suggests esoteric occult practices, and when we go back and we look at the history, W.B. Yeats, the great Irish poet, who was also part of the Golden Dawn, had also approached the owners of the castle because he wanted that castle for the Golden Dawn, and so much so that he also brought along with him the first Irish president. So, and he was to argue the case that this castle should be awarded to the Golden Dawn. Now, at that particular time, the Golden Dawn were looking for doorways, portals, and this island may be one of those places, or the local vicinity.
Do you think, to some degree, Barry and Steve, that it is us humans that are impressing upon the land our intent, and sort of kind of impregnating these areas of eye strangeness, sweeping statement? Do you think that we're adding to the phenomena by sort of being there and sort of, I don't know, treating it with reverence, ancient people to present day? Because these, obviously, there's something there within the land that's attracting people, but is our intent also enhancing and adding to it? Just throw it out there. Do you think that's possible?
I think obviously, you know, what people don't realize is that how much all various forms of phenomena has a connection with geological areas. I mean, the geology of is a huge area which is totally ignored when it comes to phenomena in given locations. I mean, when everybody says UAP or UFO, I mean, they look to the skies. One thing they're not doing is look into the ground, the geology, and now we know purposely when the TTSA came out and stated, about their 5 observables, and how that some of these objects has 3 different methods of flying: in the water, in the air, in space. But they did, and I have this on record, purposely leave out the fact that they are seemingly metaphysical and go into the physical ground, into hillsides, into cliffs, into volcanoes. I mean, it's totally ignored. It's very rarely talked about there's a extremely strong connection with the phenomena and the geology of these locations. And the downside of that is that most people aren't aware that they're heading into those locations. Because, like I say, when it comes to UFOs, people just kind of look to the skies. That's kind of the ruse, I think. But the connection, through the research now, which is like what Barry's doing, is pointing out that there's a massive geological connection that we're overlooking.
It's difficult, Steve, isn't it? It's difficult to actually discuss and put across correctly, for me anyway. I'll just give a brief story. 2 minutes. There's a guy in Scarborough looking towards Speeton and Bempton, the area where I live, and he's with his daughter. One evening, they're sat in this cafe with a big balcony looking to the cliffs, and he describes, I wrote about it, I called it the 1,000-foot UFO, because I spoke to the guy face to face, and I asked him the size of this, and we paced it out. And he said he was looking at the cliffs with his daughter, and they got other people within this establishment to look. He says, and a sphere of light came out from the cliff. Then another one. And I think he'd said there was about 5 in total, and a red light above them, and there's a space between each one that looks equal. And he believed they were all one, or at least they were acting as one, because it did a sweep of the sea, then back. He said, but they all retracted back into the cliff. And when I'd spoken about it, Steve, but I've not thought about it in the way you're talking now, I'd said, I am not suggesting that there's some alien base within the cliffs at Speeton and Bempton, but this is what the man's saying. And maybe I've got to find a different way, or we all have, of putting over what we're trying to say. And I don't mean you're saying it wrong. I can't think of a way to say it, because I don't particularly think there's a base with aliens running about in the cliffs below that area. But it's clear that whatever this was retracted back into the cliffs. So he said it's finding the right words, I think, or being able to put it over in such a way. And I'll just put it out before you answer that anybody with questions in the chat, please put them in capital letters for Steve and Barry, please. And fire them away at them. So I don't know. Just throwing it out there.
I think in regards to the rocks, there's a key component there that a huge amount of research is missing, and I think that their study is demanded there, and we also have to look at what we term aliens, because there is good work out there that has already been done that suggests that what we're looking for was already here before we were. So who is the alien? So there's all of this factor, and we have to understand that a huge amount of the phenomena does appear around, on, in rocks, whether it be cliffs, caves, huge rock strata. All of this ties a lot of the phenomena together. David Paulides is another man who wrote the Missing 411 books in the United States, and he's even admitted within his own work a huge majority of the people who disappear under unusual circumstances, in fact bloody weird circumstances, disappear predominantly in boulder fields. We're back to the rocks.
Yeah.
So there's definitely something there, and this aspect of the shining ones, the Nordics that we tend to see, or the fairies, or whatever the case may be, this is just a simple projection. That's all that is. And the three of us that are in this interview now are of the mindset, we've been here this long, we've been doing this for this long, we understand that there's a level of deception. It's the level of the deception, I think, that is underestimated, and how long that deception has been going on, and the purpose behind that. I think the purposes behind that deception is another interview altogether. But I definitely think that there's a huge amount of research that we need to turn our attention to, and possibly retract a lot of the perception that we have that these things are coming from Alpha Centauri and Mars and everything else. We should be turning and looking in the other direction. Remember the old magician's trick, look at this hand, but don't look at this one.
Well, yeah, don't. Yeah.
So that is really what's going on here.
Yeah, it's very, very true that there's a lot of, if you go back and look at just the evidence, I would say anybody who's tracking back in time, looking at the evidence, don't focus on the UFO phenomena. Just focus on everything. It's a little bit strange and weird. I mean, if you even just look into the skull experiment that took place in Norfolk, England from 92 to 98, some of the strangest and phenomena has ever been documented, manifested, and to the point where they felt comfortable, the mediums, to conduct a number of experiments. One of those experiments was to try and reach out in that same manner to things not of this world, really. I mean, I'm not saying extraterrestrial, but of the world we know. And there was, when these apparitions appeared, they were described by people as if they were being put together. It was just like an outline, but then it was kind of pieced together. And from that, they had manifestations of UFOs, which were seen traveling around the room. Balls of light, intelligent, that is, which would react to thought. If you wanted them to come near you, they would come near you. You could feel mass to them. They could, they'd hit your finger. You could grab one and see the light coming through your hand, and it would bounce around in your hand like a bumblebee. These things were physical manifestations. And then the entities that we're seeing were more like the Greys, really, to be honest with you. And if you could track back even further in time, when Aleister Crowley was involved in the very particular types of Egyptian, I would say, conjuring type of phenomena, which he got heavily involved in, had the experience of a manifestation which looks very similar to a Grey, which referred to as Lam or Aswan, and he was described to be an interdimensional being, not extraterrestrial, interdimensional. The Vril Society, which was the German Metaphysical Society during the times of the Second World War in Germany, were said to communicate. I mean, they started off as just a metaphysical society of mediums, but then it was manipulated and controlled to the point where they were communicating with what was coming through to them, explaining that they were Aldarians and these were from another planet. And they would give little bits of information about advanced aviation or avionic technology. Little bits. Yeah. Never a full picture. You would never get a full picture. And that's why the Germans were never fully successful in doing what they wanted to do with some of these pieces of technology. And then in the 1970s, Bell and Boeing, the big companies, aviation companies, were involved in seances in trying to communicate with things to give them exactly the same thing, details about advanced aeronautics. It's just crazy. There are these intelligences, but the thing is that there seems to be that ruse that, okay, we are from this planet, we are from that planet. But if you go through history and have a look at all the different types of entities that have been reported and encountered around the world, we're up to about the 2000 mark. And we're really dealing with 2,000 different entities and 2,000. It sounds a bit like a Star Trek episode. Yeah. I think it's more feasible to think that these things manipulate our perceptions. We already know that they're manipulating our cognition. We are cognitively impaired, just as I've had experiences. And normally, if I see something next to the road next to me, I'm out the car. I'm not afraid about phenomena. I'm out. I'm there. But when you travel on, and then suddenly, a mile later, you suddenly kind of click. What just happened? Did I just see this? Why didn't I act normal?
Why didn't I stop? Yeah, you're absolutely.
Cognitive impairment happens because the phenomena seems to grab us, control us, manipulates us. what we've seen, we don't really know what we're seeing. We perceive things in a certain way, what they probably want us to perceive, but not. It goes further than that. It's very deep core in regarding how they can manipulate our psychology as well. So if it's just extraterrestrials on another planet, then why is it intertwined with an ancient historic phenomenon known as paranormal? Why? And that's a very earthly thing. Why is it all intertwined in that manner? If we're just dealing with some extraterrestrials coming from another planet, that's the big thing.
I think we should also look, and I know that I'm making jest of this, but the amount of abductions that has occurred and the amount of probes that have been placed up people's anuses, how many times do they have to send a probe up there to realize it's just a pile of crap? And it seems to be something that continues on and on and on and on. It's something that there's no learning from this. It's just a repeat. And the likes of our interactions are very, very telling when the phenomena first appears or on the lead up to the manifestation. We have what I term a 20-second window in which our defenses are already engaged at that particular point. Our fight or flight is already moving. But that voice, that intuition, the seat of our discernment is very, very subtle and can be interfered with, especially from a modern perspective. Our food and what we drink can interfere with that tremendously. It doesn't matter what piece of equipment you have in your backpack. It's not going to outperform the body and the body's response to outward stimulus. That will never be beaten. But the problem being that when it passes that 20-second initial period, and we fail to listen or recognize those instinctual patterns, that's when this conscious connection can weasel its way in and manipulate our own sensory inputs. And that is exceptionally problematic. And also, what is it that they're taking during an abduction? Is it physical? Or is there another element to us that they're removing from the body and the body stays put in the bed? And also the way that they interact with us and when they interact with us is another important thing. There are huge amounts of details that tie the phenomena together over a greater historical period. To really appreciate the context of this phenomena and how long it has been happening, we see these key particular points that gel the phenomena together, irrelevant of the mask in which it decides to appear in. It ties it all together. And what we are looking at is possibly something that's coming from the same source.
Yeah, I would agree.
Which is interesting what were you saying there, Barry, because recent test, it was a CRS system in Japan. It was programmed for 3 years. It's an artificial intelligence software. Jacques Vallée tried to do the same thing back in the 60s, 67, I think it was, but he failed, unfortunately, because the AI back then was nowhere near what it's like today. After spending 3 years of putting all this data, and I mean, when you talk about data, it's everything you can think of, not just a UFO phenomenon, but every subject, the abduction, the crop circles, missing time, and then the subjects of that, all the different experiences thrown into a computer, including the paranormal, including cryptids. And what they did after 3 years is press the button expecting it to kick out reams and reams of conclusions as to what it all means. And it came back and it was a very interesting, it was literally 2 lines, it's funny enough, which shocked them because they thought there'd be a lot of data. And the AI realized is that it looked at the whole areas, all the many different topics and subjects, what we might refer to as anomalous phenomena in general. And it recognized so much connectivity. It believed it was from a single source. And it said also that the possibility that source might have the capabilities of creating physiological manifestation, physiological control. And well, that's it then. I mean, if the AI is looking at it all and thinks, well, you know what, there's so much connectivity here, they've got to have a connection.
I think that in itself is a point that we should really examine here, in that the manifestation can be anything. During the early seances, as Steve had pointed out, of school and things like that, these things were appearing, and for the sitters, they felt these fingers going onto their arms, and they reached up the arm until they got to the elbow, and there was nothing after that. So anything can be manifested. The small UFOs were manifested. All of this, all these different things were manifesting, including the grey that made its way into the seance room. What the hell is a grey doing in a seance room? I thought this was something from outer space. No,
exactly.
And interestingly, a lot of the experiments that were going on in Skoll experiments were being done in almost total darkness, to maybe a wisp of light from time to time, but predominantly a lot of it is being done in darkness. Why is that exactly? Why does the manifestation need to be done in darkness? Because if we go back into the 1970s, the Livermore laboratories in the United States were doing the same bloody experiments in daylight, and the manifestation was occurring in daylight. So we're the ones that are being fooled. These rules that we think we're setting up to help spirit, or whatever the case may be, are nothing but frivolous, because those rules don't apply to it.
I agree in part, but the phenomena does seem to operate in darkness from my knowledge of, or my experience. And you hear of people getting interactions on a lonely road at 3 a.m. in the morning, and suddenly this occurs. I'm not saying it doesn't occur on the same stretch of road at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, but these things do seem to operate under the hours of darkness, unless, like you've just said, we're all being fooled, and this is what we're kind of led to believe. Steve touched on the history earlier, and go back decades, and people are seeing kind of structured craft. So with the current trend in thinking, and I'll use Steve and Barry as an example, and lots of other people, myself, where we think it's multi-phenomena, and we think there's lots of things presenting under and one, we'll call it the Godhead, with the one single source that's presenting it. Do you think the phenomena itself will start to show us different things, or is it already?
I think it already has been for a long time. I mean, it's forever. The mask is forever changing. And what's also interesting is that sometimes,
sorry for butting in, Steve, but is it changing with us as we're evolving?
It's changing throughout eras. I mean, we had this big spate of the greys throughout the 80s and 90s and stuff at its peak. I think over a period of time, those are going to change, because prior to, I mean, people say, oh, well, the greys were around in the 60s and the 50s and the 40s. No, they weren't. The ones which were around then, I mean, if you take the Betty and Barney Hill incident, that wasn't a grey, but they were small, but they were more human looking, but small. Yeah, definitely not human, of course, but similar, but very small. These are the same ones that are apparently associated with Roswell and things like that. But where were the greys then? Where's our space brothers? Where's the human looking ones? These times, and it's not just that. I think wraps around the perception of the phenomenon as well. Like during the Second World War, we had Foo Fighters that looks like tracer fire. We had ghost rockets that look like rockets. Just prior to the airships, we had phantom airships. And I think there's a predecessor through consciousness alone. It's too coincidental. I mean, I can count hundreds of different incidents, and if I just pick one of them out, there's simply that in the 1950s we do a movie, which is when the Earth stood still, where the UFO comes down. We've probably all seen that movie, black and white. Klaatu comes down, and lands on the baseball pitch just next to the Washington building. 5 months, literally to the day, there's a passover of 5 crafts, saucer crafts, over that exact location. I don't think that's coincidental. I think somehow they're intertwined with the consciousness of humanity, maybe where we're going, what's coming, what's going to be changing, but also from the past bringing it forward. So sometimes we're seeing things, how they were perceived to be in the past brought forward to today, and that can be just as confusing.
I also see with this particular manipulation of the consciousness, that when you become suspicious, that gives us power. Because when we become suspicious of the storyteller, suddenly it backs off, it clears off, it's gone. There is no communication whatsoever. Why is that?
Yeah.
If something's there for the benefit of humanity, it's not going to mind a few questions for clarity, but they do. Believe us, or it's gone. And we see this time and time again with interaction, in that you have to believe everything that we tell you. Otherwise, the deal's off.
Would that similarly apply to someone who claims they've had some incredible interaction and been given fabulous information that's never going to be heard, or not? You know, they've not told the president or the prime minister and he's imparted this information. They've just told Paul Sinclair, or they've just told, I don't know, woman next door to me, and she's got this incredible story, and she's almost going to get laughed at, or he's almost going to get laughed at for speaking about it. I kind of wonder, what's that about?
I think it's the one-liner. I think the point is the one-liner, which is about ecology and of the planet Earth. I mean, the small kids of this school of aerial phenomena, you know, in Zimbabwe, in Africa. You know, why deliver that to young kids playing in a school ground? They don't even know what they're talking about, let alone can make a difference about what they say. I mean, you know, they show intelligence beyond recognition sometimes, and you think to yourself, well, surely they would know. They know how to disarm nuclear warheads. They will know. They already know that is an order. They already know that is a governance over certain amounts of people in humanity by a hierarchy of individuals. This is how we operate, like many insects do, I suppose. And they know that because they manipulate that. You know, they've taken out warheads of ICBM's joint flight at 14,000 miles an hour. They've done it over military bases like Maelstrom and numerous others, not just the US, but around the world. They know exactly what the level of our intelligence is. So they want to make an impact. They deliver that information to the highest ranking, not to a bunch of kids in the schoolyard. And it's not just them. It's nearly every other case. And they say the same thing and they show the same images. And, you know, but has there been any change? Have they stopped, you know, the planet Earth being, you know, being crucified by humanity over the years? No, none at all. And in fact, you know, we think to ourselves, well, it looks to be a bit of a red herring here. It's like feeding us the one-liner that doesn't seem to make any sense whatsoever.
I think the basis of that, I think the basis of that red herring definitely comes in and makes itself obvious when we look at the likes of Zimbabwe and the school there. But the children going out and seeing and having the interaction with this craft and these beings. But what's rarely spoken about is the fact that the children were frightened. There's the 20-second rule. The instinct is already cut in. Get the hell away from these. Yeah. Our instincts are telling us, move. And these kids were stunned in fear. And many of them are still dealing with that particular fear years later. Now, if something's out there for the benefit of humanity, why is it scaring the bejesus out of us?
Yeah, of course, Barry. You know, there was that incident, because I found out actually through further in later interviews with what happened to the kids, that it was a handful that actually were drawn towards the object, not away, but drawn towards it. They couldn't understand why they were being drawn towards this. What they could see was a small being stood on top of the craft. But then, this is the scariest part of this incident. Those 4 or 5 kids were their perception was completely manipulated by being drawn, not to this entity stood on the craft, but another one to the side, which seemed to be skipping along and then vanishing and appearing again and skipping along. And this process was loop. It was like a video loop they were seeing. They were drawn into there while this other small being was approaching them. And when they asked the kids to really calm down and think about what was going on in their minds, they said this being wanted them to come with them. You know, and that is complete manipulation on children. Yeah. You know, and that's what's scary about
the diversion of the diversion of this thing that was skipping along in order for the being to get.
It's just like Barry said, it's the magician's hand. You know,
yeah, absolutely, and it's frightening, isn't it? You know, I know we've covered the awakening, but at the awakening, I'll be talking about the night people. That one, isn't it? That one. There it is. So I'll be talking. Just where's my hands? I'll be talking about the night people, and I don't know, and I'll hold my hands up and say that I don't know that these things are from outer space or where they're from. 100% they're alien to everything that we know and understand as being normal. But for all I know, they could have been demons. It might not be a word that you guys want to use, but I don't know what they were. And I still, you know, I don't think I ever will. But just throw it out there.
It's an interesting point, Paul, because what people should really consider is demons and the devil. What if that is just another face?
Yeah.
What if it's just all part and parcel, you know, appearing to be angels, you know, and whispering good intent that leads usually to bad intent, you know, demonics, demons, you know, the sightings of whole awful things like that, the sightings of aliens, the sightings of apparitions, ghosts, witches, goblins, you name it. You know, it's a cocktail of things. And how long has this gone on for? Because if we trace back in time like Barry does, you'll find that there are periods where it fashions out and then something else starts, and it fashions out and something else starts, you know. And I think ultimately, roundabout, I think it must have been serpents were probably wallowed the first. But then, hey, you know, how do we even know that's not a mask? You know, maybe they deliver to us throughout humanity and they interfere and they do change history to some degree, these things. They manifest in certain different ways and we perceive them to be different. And then what we do is we say, okay, well, that must be the demons. That must be that must be the aliens. Those must be the ghosts. And just because simply the perception of them at that time is considered and fits into a regime of belief.
I think we need. I think from a researcher standpoint, I think we need to remove the walls within the pigeon boxes.
I'll just go in there then. So yeah.
I think that's an important step.
But you know, I mean, obviously, there's some absolutely fabulous UFO researchers. So it's not about slighting anybody or anything. But I do think that a lot of people are missing a trick. There's Les. I don't think a lot of people are missing a trick within their chosen field of research. We've had a few people on, absolutely brilliant guests, but they won't look at any other aspect of the phenomena by what they are entrenched in. And I'll say, well, yeah, but didn't you have this presenting at the same time or in a similar time frame? And if this has got a history of light form phenomena around it, and no, we deal with structured craft. We deal, you know the score, and it's difficult because it's almost as this is what I want to believe, and this is what I'm going to stick with. And I just think people are missing a big part of what's happening. And we've got Les here, so we might have a few questions if that's okay, Steve. Barry.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, great response in the chat tonight, and really appreciate people taking time out and coming on listening to Barry and Steve and Paul tonight. So I'll start off with a question from Patricia Adams Wright. Welcome, Pat. So Steve, will you be filming these lectures?
Okay.
For those of us who won't be able to attend.
Sure. For the Awakenings event. Right. Okay. So there's two ways of doing this. First off is that the whole event is being streamed, but it's not being streamed to the UK. It's being streamed over to 4BK TV because it's a 4BK TV World Tour. And that will appear on Billy Carson's 4BK TV channel on the internet. So that'll be the opportunities for people to watch Awakenings for this year, if they can't attend, is either to watch it through the live stream there, or it will appear later, assumably, probably on Amazon. Because if you can actually obtain all last year's Awakening on Amazon. It's actually on Amazon UK at the moment, on Prime. But we will be doing recordings, but more so like the interviews and things like that. But the whole event is being streamed, and that'll be available to be pretty much all of it on 4BK TV or forbiddenknowledge.com.
Brilliant. And I've got a question from, see if we can bring this one up. And I suppose this question applies to you, Barry, as well. Does Steve think that we as individuals can manifest phenomena?
Oh God, yeah, of course we can. I think you look at this, you know what I'll say to anybody, go out and look, do some bit of research across the internet. Look at the Sorot experiment, right? Okay, now just basically communicating with things. 5, 6 people around a table, all happy, all cheerful, all singing. And it seems like heightened emotion doesn't have to be always happy, but heightened emotion has an association to phenomena being manifest or communication. That Sorot experiment was quite interesting, which led into further experiments that took place in Ontario, Canada, called the Philip experiment, where they literally manifested a ghost, which they gave him a name, Philip, and they gave him a history, they gave him a name, they gave him a wife, they gave him all sorts of things. But he brought it into realism, they brought it into the living world, interactive, which means it was acting a bit like a tulpa. That, you know, and this is, and if you look into come out of this area and look into the occult, they're doing the same thing. It was about breeding into and belief into this thing that could be conjured and give it its own sense. And that is really, if you modern day, would be similar to your CE5 phenomenon. Instead of 5 mediums around the table, you've got 5 meditators around a circle, where you've got manifestation of lights, UFOs, and things like that. There's a stronger connection between our involvement with this phenomena than what people might think. But yes, absolutely, certainly. What do you think, Barry? I'd say absolutely.
I think there's possibly another avenue that we may wish to look at as well in regards to the likes of the Philip manifestation and things like that. We created an environment in which one can slip through. So that archetype that we think we created has actually opened the door for that shadow to step through and take that hat on, if you like, because you know, no matter how hard that I pray to the universe and whatever God's in it, that this slip of paper is going to turn into 22 karat gold by tomorrow. It's going to be paper tomorrow. So I have an issue with the whole belief thing. I think that we may be creating situations in which the shadow can step through and fill. And again, we're back to deception.
Neil, that's a really good point what Barry makes, because there is evidence of that. I mean, in the 1970s, a young girl from Yorkshire, she disappeared for 8 months. Police were you know, they thought the worst. Something significantly bad had happened to her. They gave up the look. The family that were living in the house started to see her apparition, and that sealed it for them. They realized that something terrible had happened to their daughter. The apparition was seen by all family during a period of 5 months, only for her to knock on the door one day. She'd ran away with the boyfriend. So what was it that manifested and looked like her and behaved like her to convince the family that she was no longer of this world? You know, that is manipulation. That is advantage. And also, you know, when we've had experiments done involved in ourselves, and we got to the point, it took a long time, of opening a communication channel. And I don't say that lightly, it takes a long time, but sometimes you shouldn't head into it too heavily because you can get a bit of an attachment. But if you reach a stage where you can say, okay, ask away, ask your questions and we will give you an answer. We posed and thought, okay, well, here's 10 questions. And we were given the answers to those 10 questions before we even gave the question. They obtained the questions from us, the sitters themselves, which means if we go to see, you know, seances or a medium or a psychic to try and find out about a loved one, all that information about that perception of that individual is within us, and it can be picked out and utilized by this phenomena and delivered back to make you and convince you that you are in communication with great Uncle Albert or your auntie or a gran or something.
Yeah.
But truly, we will never know. And this is why the parapsychological departments will rule that they do not have enough evidence to show that there's proof of afterlife. Afterlife is a different thing, because they are aware that, yes, we are in communications with the intelligences, but they are also aware of the deception it's involved and the capabilities of delivering information that they can retrieve from ourselves, the sitters. That makes it almost impossible to work out if it's an authentic communication with a loved one. And because we can't confer that, that's why they turn around and say, well, we've no evidence. We cannot say there's evidence for afterlife. It's a very problematic thing regarding the deception.
There must be more than a trickster type element going off, though. What do you think the phenomena derives from doing that? Do you think it's enjoying the emotional input that it's getting from us putting it out there? What are the reasons? And I know we don't know them. But what do you think the reasons for this behaviour might be?
There are some suggestions out there that, and some work that has suggested that one of the answers to that is he who owns the body wins. So it's a fight for the body itself to create a situation in which our defense is lower, and attachment or oppression is very, very easy to develop from those early stages. So that's something to be very, very cognizant about when going into this.
Yeah.
But
not just paranormal. I mean, he's latched into everything.
Yeah.
Robert Bigelow did an interview with George Knapp in February of 2021, I think it was. And for the very first time, he actually opened up. And he said in a roundabout way, he wished he hadn't been involved with some of the experiments at Skinwalker Ranch, some of them, because he believed there had been attachment. And he wished he hadn't done it, because he believes, and if you talk with him now after being open about it, he actually believes this attachment, literally, it ran havoc through his life. It developed, he first identified it as, he would say, multiple serendipities and profound coincidences, to the point where he realized very quickly that there was an attachment in his life, and it bled havoc. I mean, when I say havoc, I mean everything that could go wrong in his life was going wrong.
Yeah.
And one thing after the other, loss of a brother, loss of a wife, loss of the dog, loss of a business, loss of this, loss of that, and it was just an absolute nightmare. He only identified this when he started talking to the NIDS team, which were also, funny enough, involved in the very same experiments, and 3 members of the NIDS team actually confirmed with him it's exactly the same with us. Exactly the same. And he concluded, and he openly mentioned this to George Knapp during an interview, it's actually up on YouTube, you can find it, is that he wished he hadn't been so heavily involved in trying to an attempt at communication. He believed that it poured into his life, and he took it back home with him, which seemed to disperse itself amongst the household and family. And I think when things get to that stage is when Barry talks about attachment and things. Sometimes there's a sting in the tail of phenomenon.
Oh yeah. And in fact, I'll give you one instance of an experience I had, and it was I was in a local shopping center with another fellow researcher from the United States. He was here in Ireland, and all of a sudden we were having a conversation as we walked along the aisle, and looking for a particular product. And this child behind us started screaming and yelling because his mother wouldn't buy him whatever it was that he wanted, and he was throwing a tantrum. And I turned around and I stared at the child to see what was going on, as you do. But our eyes fixed, and I saw beyond the child that was not the child. And that moment that we connected, suddenly that child stopped and got up and walked away in a quiet manner. Now, I could tell you, I went back to my conversation with my friend, and I happened to cop that the child was standing looking around the corner of the aisle watching us. And so that particular connection was made because I was very aware that this was beyond the child. And I happened to bump into the same child about a month later, and there was no trace of that particular thing at all. It had moved. So these hitchhikers are quite prevalent, not only in the world of the paranormal, but throughout life in itself. We can find them in all traces.
But do you think it's emotional outbursts and the times of stress and emotion that they find the ability, or it's more optimistic that they can actually interact with us? And the fact that Steve talking about doing experiments, and you've done them yourself, Barry, actually leaving, I don't mean that it's wrong to do them, but we've got to be so careful because we're leaving ourselves open for this to attach itself. I know in a nutshell, that's what you've been talking about anyway, but I've experienced it up there, not me personally, but one of my daughters did. And we'll touch on it later because it's about you guys. But any more questions, Les?
Yeah, I'm just going to come in with a question myself, and it's for Steve. Do you think, Steve, two-part question, I guess, do you think, Steve, that humans will reach another higher level of consciousness? And if so, if humans reach that consciousness, will we be actually needing to reach out to these entities and phenomena and all that? Or would it just be a seamless run-in with what they're doing and what we're doing?
It's a good question. Most people would say yes, because they believe in that, the development of humanity is about consciousness. I think we've gone backwards. I think in our ancient past, our ancestors were very, very highly conscious regarding phenomena. They knew where the veils were thin. They knew how to communicate. We're having to go back in time and learn from the ancients to bring it forward to try and understand. I think as we push forward, I don't think we've got much hope, because I think there's too many distractions and too much control, too much socialism, and I think it's like living in a world with blinkers on. I think we're purposely kept occupied and away from our true understanding and consciousness about what the world is around us. And I don't think we're heading down a great path where we're going to have enlightenment and find this wonderful consciousness again. I think we've got further and further away over periods of time. I look back at what the ancients must have known, and you know what, we can all dig up bones and say, oh yes, and this is how they lived. It can tell us nothing about their consciousness, their spirituality, what they were aware of. We now know, their perceptions must have probably been a lot higher than we are. We're the most limited creatures on the planet as we stand today.
Yeah.
So I think we're going backwards. Now with the introduction of technology and AI and things like that, we have to question, like Barry said right at the beginning of tonight's conversation, is that there's a certain alarm bells there as well. And is it going to take us in a different, completely different path? Is it taking us away further than we really need to be to find out about our true selves, the world we live in, the things that we share our reality with? Probably the opposite, Les, I would say at this moment in time. Barry might have a view on that.
Yeah, well, that was my next question. Is AI and technology going to be a barrier to us reaching a higher consciousness?
Is AI part of the phenomena?
Well, yeah. Years ago, we were able to see that there was a crossover between technology and this phenomena. There seemed to be able to have a certain amount of interaction, but now it seems to have developed further than that. And do I have hopes for humanity? You maybe mightn't like my answer. Yeah, where we're going, we need to be very, very careful of the ones who are steering us. And like I said at the beginning, test what's coming through. As it says in the big book, test the spirit that is of God. And we need to test. And like powers that be that are steering us in particular directions, now is the time to test, why are you taking us in this direction? Because if we go wholeheartedly, we're nothing more than a bunch of lemmings jumping off a cliff face.
Yeah, good answer.
Right, I'll just come on with another question for Barry. Has Barry any direct first-hand experience with a fear?
Oh my God, yeah. Ken.
Almost had you jumped.
Yeah. Yes, Ken, I have. Yes, many occasions. And in fact, I see this unusual crossover happen also within the Fae kingdom. So much so that I've actually been able to photograph them. I've had the opportunity to photograph the phenomena as it appeared. There was one instance. I had some reporters there as well from Wales. They accompanied an expedition, if you like, into that particular realm, and there was this orange orb, the amber gambler, that appeared, but beyond through that, there was a landscape that was appearing that wasn't part of here. So that of course raised a lot of curiosity. But the first night that we had set up camp at the base of this particular hill that they were famous for appearing at, the reporter was in her tent with her sister, and she was hit that hard. The side of the tent was hit that hard that she lifted and across the tent and landed on her sister on the other side. So that was their first cue to say we're here. And over the progress of the next day or so, it became more and more apparent that interaction was happening here, and this is what it was. But the likes of the Banshee, the great Irish fairy, I suppose, entity, is also something that we see directly connected with the stone. These ancient stone mounds that were being built from people from Syria and Iraq, here in Ireland, and the DNA proves that that we have this entity coming through, and she's not the only one, because her name is broken down from Banshee into woman of the mounds. So it's people of the mounds. These doorways that we're opening, and these things are coming through the rocks onto the landscape. They're also going back through the rocks into the landscape. And there was a huge amount of this. We can see, even if we take the little story of Jesus out in the wilderness, and he's met by Satan, and he's taken into the mountain, not on the mountain, into the mountain, and shown the other kingdoms. So there's a lot to be said about the use of the language and things like that, and where it goes. But the connection with stone links us directly to the fairy and also the other phenomena. It goes out in a spider's web, but they are very much connected. Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. I think it's really interesting. If you research giant rock, remember we talked about giant rock, didn't we? Yeah. It was a giant rock out there in Nevada in the desert. Was a place since the 1950s. It was one of the biggest gatherings. It was probably one of the first UFO conferences. People would drive out there. But you actually start to research why. Because the stories would have us believe that, UFOs are seen out that area. It's funny enough that interesting. The story, how it starts, is that it wasn't nothing to do with any UFOs. No UFOs were seen. No flying saucers, nothing like that. What it was entities, profound looking beings that came out of the rock, which was witnessed, and that got all mixed up and tied into UFOs and this and the other, and it became a place. And don't get me wrong, UFOs are seen there now because that's where people go and that's where they'll be seen. But you start to look back, and I'm sure that's just one of many, many stories that have got twisted over time, that these things are associated more with the rock as opposed to any UFO being seen in the sky.
So if we're looking at one all-encompassing phenomena, Barry, how does that tie in then? From what you're saying, the Fae is a separate entity away from that. Is it, or is it all part of this one?
Oh, it's all part. Yes, it's all part of
the one. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, that particular connection is there's the rock connection to the phenomenon, but there's also the connection that we should look at, which is iron. The Jewish Semitic incubus and succubus attacks, the jinn, the fairy, even the grey aliens, the invading grey aliens into our, as you wrote about there, the night people, they will all be retracted or
suppressed, won't it?
suppressed, yeah, by the introduction of iron to the situation. They will attack in principle when the iron in the body is low. A lot of the incubus and succubus attacks wait. They'll attack 9 times out of 10, and they'll attack women more so than men, because the women enter their monthly cycle where they become anemic, and that's when the door opens and the attack begins. They're able to reach us at that particular point, and there's a certain aspect in which they are reaching for purposes which is in a book further down the line. But yeah, so we've got all those connections together, which is tying a lot of the phenomena together, which is the rocks, of course, and the iron connection. And again, you know, if aliens are thrown off the scent by iron, why are they thrown off the scent, and jinn and the incubus and succubus? Are we looking all at the same thing? This is a reinforcing point that's suggesting that we're looking at the same phenomena coming from the same.
Yeah, I think that we kind of agree.
Might be worth telling them, Barry, where iron doesn't work.
Oh, iron, yeah. Iron doesn't work when you go underground. And so that's something to bear in mind. I was in a cave system in Ireland. It hadn't been opened since 1945. It was actually an old tunnel system, and it was about 3 miles long, went underneath the mountain. And I was there with 2 guides that had come in just to make sure that, you know, nothing was going to happen. And one also remained at the mouth of the cave should there have been a cave in. He could have went for help. So the padlock was taken off, and in we went. And I went in to take some photographs for a particular book that I was doing. And while we were in there, I had the same experience that I had when I was in Belize, in the Xibalba, the Mayan underworld, and also in an old gold mine in California. When suddenly, when we dropped this into silence as the camera was taking its shots, this thing was starting to interact with us further in the cave system. Now, the 2 guys that were with me were convinced that the guy at the cave, at the mouth of the cave, was on the cell phone. He was talking to someone, and that was his voice carrying. It was not the case, because by the time we had got the shots finished, and they went out straight away and started interrogating the guy, who said, that was not me. It started to rain and I pulled myself into the corner. I was not on any phone. As I was coming out, I was the last coming out, and there was a shaft that led off to the left, and the voice spoke directly. It wanted me to follow it. Hell no. And that's me going out. I remember the warning from the cave guides in Xibalba, in which they said, do not follow the voices, they will kill you.
It's past history of the voices. Yeah. I don't know whether Les is going to read.
Yeah, well, I just brought, you saw that question earlier, didn't you? And I guess that's for you, Steve.
I don't know whether Steve.
Chris will be there as well. And
is that his new name? It's Chris Cooltime
Turner. Yeah. Chris will be there, and of course with Jimmy Church is there, and Nick Pope is there, and a few other people. Chris will be coming along with us, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and just to get that one in before you end it, Ken, you'll probably decline, but we would love to have you on the live stream. So,
Ken's a good guy. He knows his stuff. Yeah.
He really does. Yeah, he really does. But any more, Les?
Yeah, well, Ken's got another question in. So
right.
Ken's doing well tonight, and a question for you, Barry. What does Barry believe or know regarding? I'll probably muck this pronunciation up.
This is the island.
Hy Brasil,
that's
right? Yeah.
West Coast, yeah.
Hy Brasil was said to be an island that appears and disappears off the west coast of Ireland. And there's been a long history there of people who have seen it. In fact, right up until the modern age, there have been accounts of people seeing it. Although it doesn't meet the mainstream fields too often. because of what we talked about earlier. But I had been looking into this aspect of High Brazil and looking at the old mapping systems that were showing not only High Brazil but another island further south called Mar. And I was curious about it, and there were scans done by the Irish Geological Society and released in a publication. And on the scans, it showed something on the seabed 200 feet down, which, for all intents and purposes, was the same shape as what the old maps had shown in the same location. Now, I went to Dublin. I shouldn't say to interrogate, but I did go down to speak to the geologists there who were involved, and I said, this particular area here that you've shown here, there are two objects that appear that seem to suggest the a repeat of the old mapping system. What do you think those are? And the first person looked at it. Well, it's probably just a coral mound. And I said, okay, you said probably. As you done the scan, I would assume you'd probably know a little bit more than just probably. Is there anyone else who would care to put an input in this? And to which our colleague came across and said, oh yeah, that's probably an underwater volcano. And I said, so we've gone from a probable coral mound to a probable underwater volcano. Is there a suggestion here that possibly the sea level had dropped off the west coast of Ireland? And he said, no, absolutely not. That is absolutely geologically sound out there. There's been no disturbances in that for the past 2 or 3 or maybe even 10,000 years. Right? Okay. Well, that doesn't explain what people were seeing. The week I got back, there was an earthquake off the Porcupine Bank, which certainly would suggest that that's different. There's something else going on there. But it was interesting that there was something that did show up, Ken, in the archaeological, or sorry, the geographical survey that does mimic High Brazil and Mar of the old mapping systems. So there's something there to check out. I would love to take one of the Irish Navy boats out and go and have a look, but unfortunately we bought them and then realized that they can't go out into rough water. So I think we were done.
Oh, a bit of sarcasm there, wasn't it? Right then, if obviously it's to both of you, if you could experience just one part of everything, the unexplained phenomena, what would it be? And start where you like. Just, or you might be saying, well, we have it, we've touched on it all anyway. But if you could experience just one part of it now, what would it be that you're looking for?
For me, standing at the event horizon of the doorway opening to the other place.
Okay.
Not going through. I have no wish to go through it. But to be able to stand there and sense it, feel it, see it, and I think that would be something of great value for me personally.
Yeah, that's quite a good one. I'd probably go with something like that as well, because there's been times when research has been gathered to know that there are little triggers to say yes, we know that is kind of possibly a double lock system. It's involved in opening some of these locations.
Yeah.
It ties in with either the setting or the rising of the sun, but not just that, but producing a certain type of arm in these ancient locations. And you got to consider those arms might be certain tones. I mean, if you just talk about India and the Gurudra mantra, I mean, you know, to train yourself to create the Gurudra mantra took half a lifetime to begin with. And that's if we've even got the vocal cords that we need to produce the Gurudra mantra now, you know, because, you know, if we don't use them, we lose them in the sense of speaking. And that's a problem when we talk about ancient sites, because a lot of these places remain locked because we haven't got that double lock system sorted properly yet. Or we've lost the method of producing the right frequency of the om. The building itself, many resonance chambers are built for that frequency. That actually remains surprisingly intact.
Yeah.
But it's a combination of things that have to take place. You know, when people are brought into those chambers and they sit in the middle, and accept these conditions which are happening at that time. It's all about timing. It's all about what's being used. But
Where
yeah,
did that knowledge
I'd love to have the opportunity to be able to see the other as another scene through that chance of being just there at the right time to see it, because we don't know, these things happen so quickly and we're unprepared for it,
I
Where
think
did
I
that
think
knowledge
from
come
from that
from?
particular perspective,
Sorry.
when Steve was in Ireland, I had him marching over the mountains and kept reinforcing timing is everything. And that was very, very important, because when we got to one of these places that was known as the doorway, we stood on the outer edge of this chasm, and the sun had already set at that stage. The camera was rolling, and suddenly this woman's voice spoke from the chasm in a language that none of us understood. But it was caught on camera. But more
Did you both hear
importantly,
it?
Oh yeah, we got it on
You
camera.
both heard it.
yeah. But what was more interesting for me was the fact that how I was connected to the land at that moment, because moments before we were going through an interview, but moments before the voice spoke, I stopped the interview and turned and looked in the direction.
Yeah.
It's as if I had picked up on it that something was coming.
Okay, so which would have led to another question, really, and that probably would have nailed it for me. When did either of you go from being an interested party to being a believer to being, no, I know this is real? There's probably been other instances before hearing that voice, but that would seal it for a lot of people, wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, my first experiences was when I was about 7 years of age. But when you're a child, you don't even think about what's real and what is not acceptable. You just, some of them were strange incidents, some of them were downright scary, but it was because of the variation. That's one thing I realized very early on, as a child, that the UFOs and lights that I've been seeing and the ghostly faces that used to scare me are seemingly connected. Why should they be both? From a child onwards. So yeah, I mean, I knew as a child they were real because I experienced them. But my dad experiences them. My father's, he's very intuitive like that, and he's always telling me about, things he's experienced. And so I guess it's just something I accepted probably at a younger age rather than during my life's work.
Did you talk about it to your parents, Steve?
Oh God, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, my first experience was a figure to walk. Nothing happened. My very first experience was a small figure walking out from the darkest corner of my room, to be honest with you. And it totally had me do whatever it wanted me to do, and I couldn't do anything about that until the experience was over with. At that, I was horrified, of course. Yeah, you can imagine. And I remember in the process of being so stressed out, not being able to control my behavior in front of this thing. I had a yellow quilt, and it used to have an embossed fluffy pattern on it. And it had all these little frills, and I was grabbing and pulling at these frills off in my hand in stress. And I remember pulling them all off. But you know what, my parents would agree that they experienced some things around me as well. So yeah, it's different. Spending 40 years in a subject is just trying to find answers.
Yeah.
Because it came knocking at my door when I was young, not the other way around. People think, oh, well, how did you get interested? Well, didn't it showed interest in me? I think that's what it was.
How many people do you think then, Steve, Barry, get touched by this at a young age and sit in silence or forget? Because there's certain triggers that people come to later in life and they go, bloody hell, I'd forgot all about that. And it kind of reignites the I don't know, the event. How did you become as involved as you are, Barry?
But before we get into that, I think we should look at it from a broad spectrum,
Okay.
rather than looking at it from, say, oh well, a ghost came into the room, or I had a UFO experience at a young age, whatever the case may be. In regards to the numbers, if we look at the incubus and succubus, there is 4 out of 10 worldwide who are attacked by this phenomenon. That's the phenomenon. So those are the starting figures. That's 40% of the world's population are having experiences of one sort or another, under whatever form it takes. And like Steve, as a child, I had my experiences. There's one experience though I've been really wanting to delve into, and I was around 15 when suddenly in the morning I was woke by the sound of this huge screaming of jet engines, and the commercial Boeing 747, and outside was foggy, and I remember going into the fetal position in bed because it was really early in the morning, and waiting to hear this crash, which never happened. And jumping up, I saw the tail fin of a plane disappear in the fog, over the top of the trees. At that particular point, I was saying, "What? Oh my God! A plane nearly crashed there. What in the hell was going on?" And I spoke to my friends in the estate, where I lived at the time, and I said, "Did you hear the plane this morning? Wasn't that ridiculous? I'm surprised that the housing estate is still here." And they said, "What plane?" And I thought to myself, years later, of course, I often wondered what the hell that was, and I do wonder, is that a screen event? Is that a screen memory? And it's something that I really wanted to go back and have a look at, but whenever I did find one particular hypnotist to go and do that, everything was set up and it was all ready to go, and then strange events occurred and it all fell apart, and I never got back to it.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and it's obviously then hypnotism, regression, is that something that you're wanting to go into moving forward then?
Yeah, I think I would like to look at that. That key interest at that moment. But yeah, outside of that, I'm very reluctant to delve into the whole psychedelics and all the rest, and this experiencing the other realms through psychedelics. I'm very resistant about it because of the fact that our gift of discernment lies within the body. The moment you remove this aspect that we need to explore the other realms, we leave behind, we decouple from the body. Then we leave behind our gift of discernment, and we can look at libraries filled with new age fluff of information that has been delivered about the state of the world and everything else through the eyes of these beings, without having a gift of discernment, without us being able to look at a person or a being, shake our head and go, "Yeah, you're talking crap."
I know you've got faith in what you're saying, Barry, and I have full respect for it, but are you not frightened? I am, that regression, hypnotic regression might suggestion might actually lead your story in a direction that's not entirely accurate.
Yes,
mine as
yes,
well.
absolutely. Yeah. Leading questions can be very detrimental to that experience, and but it really is the only way that I can see that I can explore that one incident. Because outside of that, I'm not interested in hypnosis for anything else, bar that one incident. Now, I did try hypnosis for past life regression, and I went to a particular person along the County Down coast, and he looked out over the harbour. It was absolutely beautiful place, and I was in the study. He was bringing me through the process of the regression, and I could tell you I was just about to step over that threshold whenever I heard footsteps in the room. There was only 2 of us in that room,
Yeah.
And there was a set of footsteps that appeared that weren't meant to be there. And that's whenever suddenly my instinct, my fight or flight cut in, my gift of discernment, and there was no way I was going through hypnosis at that particular point. No way. My alert system had kicked in, and I wasn't intended to bring back a hitchhiker.
And listening to your body, it's a good thing, in it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
what it's telling you. Yeah. Any views on that, Steve?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've been on locations, and we've had our research we put to the test and been out on the deserts and the mountains, haven't we? And it's delivered. The phenomena has delivered, and it's so associable to knowing when you need to get the hell out of there, really.
Yeah.
And, because you like we say, you know, it's sometimes this magician's hand can play its part, and they can put on a beautiful lighting show, and it's almost glamoring, really. It's a point where you just nothing else exists but the beautiful light display in the sky putting on for you. The downside of that is that you're completely unaware of what's behind you, and sometimes you have to be snapped out of it by Barry saying, you know what, we gotta go, because they were already on the ground behind us, and we have to hot tail out of there. You know, I don't want that type of experience, you know. Well, I mean, you have to press into the subject to get answers, but then I've also learned that you have to pull a brake now and again, because you can become saturated to the phenomenon, tries to get under the skin. Before you know it, it's invading your home, it's causing upset, it's managing to get past your defense system. And it's just simply because some of the research that we worked on, what we're involved in, I think sometimes it's like you get a slap on the hand. It doesn't like you sniffing around. It fuels the fire in our case, but you kind of got to take that step back and think, okay, let's time for a breather now, because we've got to let things settle down, because what you don't want is a long-term form of infestation, or you know, that type of stuff taking place. It's a nightmare if it becomes a long-term infestation.
Yeah. And certainly that's been happening with me recently, in that I've been introduced to a new type of phenomena which I was completely oblivious to. You know, you pick up the signature of the Fae, of the Jinn, and the UFOs and the paranormal. This was completely different. And I was horrified in one point that something had breached my home defenses, but intrigued by another one to say, well, what are you exactly? And it was visitors to the home had seen the phenomena. It presented itself to them, but it was behind me. I didn't know that it was there. I had no sense of it whatsoever. But the dog did. And watching its responses, and it would alert me at 3 o'clock in the morning. It would come to the side of the bed and push the bed to alert me there's someone in the house. And I would go downstairs. Unlike what I would usually be screaming at during a horror movie, I'm screaming at the TV, turn on the bloody light. I didn't turn on the light in this particular instance and went down into the darkness. Had no idea it was there. But it was one particular night within the past month and a half that I was in the spare room, and the dog was on the bed beside me, and she woke, and that's what woke me. And I could feel this thing crawling onto the bed, and that's when I finally picked up the signature, and it never came back after that. But I got its signature. I says, okay, you'll not do that again.
Yeah, it's strange you say that, you know. This property we're in now, and Mary, my wife, she would invariably go to bed before me, and I'm not sat up in early hours. I usually fall asleep and come to bed about 2 o'clock or something. But she'd come through and tell me, she said, you're gonna have to come to bed. I mean, and you'll not get my wife. I don't know about your wife stroke partners, but she'll not talk about this all the time, but she'll say it's there again. She says, now just feel it on the bed, and it's got right behind me. I can feel it right laid behind me on the bed, and she'll get up. And it's not happened now for about 2 years. I only felt it twice when I were in bed with her, and you could feel it coming up the bed. Just out of interest, and I mean, there'll be people listening to this that might be raising their eyes, or there'll be people listening to it going, good God, I know this. Did it give you that tingly feeling in your legs as it was like, you got like an electricity type feeling?
Yes.
Yeah, and I felt no fear, and I'm not the bravest person in the world. Seriously, I'm not. But I was kind of, I knew it were happening, and I were wanting to experience it. Maybe that's the wrong thing to accept this, but it happened twice, and it's not happened for a long time. But it were happening more with Mary, and I didn't want to get onto that. But go on, Steve. Sorry.
I think there was an occasion last year. I think it was last year when myself and Barry were doing some research on. I remember it was Sumerian demons. I think it was.
Yes.
You remember that? Yep. We were both heavily doing some research into this, and I went home after work, and it was probably around about maybe 6 o'clock at night, something like that. And I had the urge just to go out. I have those occasions where I just have an urge to go out and look. And most of the times when I do, I usually see something. And of course, on this occasion, like many others, yes, there was something in the sky. It was looked to be physical in craft of some sort, but it was just stationary. And I watched it took some photographs of it, and it wasn't moving. Nothing happened. It just sat there. So after I took my fill of photographs, I got bored and I went in. Funny enough, people say, I can't believe you did that, but I did for some reason. I don't know. I went in, and it was a little bit of a talking conversation, with Jackie because she saw it as well, and thought that was a bit unusual that suddenly I had the urge to go out and look, and it's happened quite a few times, that sort of thing. And but that evening, I went to bed. And like most nights, I woke up in the early hours. I'm not too sure what time it was, probably 2, 3 o'clock or something. And I ended up going to the bathroom. But when I came back in to the bedroom and I got in bed, something got in with me. But the strangest thing was, it was a physical body I could feel, and an arm came up, and I don't know how it can do, but it came out from underneath the mattress around me, and one like this, and I was shaking trying to get this damn thing off me. And the strangest thing I experienced was I grabbed its arm, trying to push its arm like this, but when I did, my fingers went numb, like a numbing. Numb. Yeah, like I'd lost sense in my fingers. But I struggled. I thought I got quite angry, and I said, "Damn, not having this sort of thing," and got this thing off me. And then once I got it off, it kind of slithered away, sort of thing, and disappeared. And looking around, there was nothing. So I ended up for the next hour having a coffee and trying to work out what the hell had gone on. So I thought I must let Barry know first thing in the morning. Anyway, I did contact Barry in the morning, and I said to him to tell him what sort of night I'd have since seeing that UFO and then this. I mean, coincidence or what?
There's got to be a connection though there. Is that?
Well, I mean, what's the chances, But before I could even tell Barry about what I'd experienced, he's telling me all hell broke loose in his house last night. Light fittings were ripped out and all sorts. And I just thought, you know what? It's just too coincidental. It's like one of those moments that you get that kind of smack on the hand and say, look, don't be doing what you're doing, or, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Has either of you ever been warned, not by the unexplained, but by authority, people, to just stop looking into certain things?
You mean men in black appearing in black sedans?
Or any government agency, some important figure just said
no,
a little bit too close to it. No.
That's never happened to me.
There was a guy I knew who was like a vicar years ago, and he said, "Oh, it's all demonic. It's all this. It's all that. You don't get into that. You stay well away and everything." And I thought to myself, well, you know what? I was not as educated as I was now, because we're talking 25 years ago. But then I started to research into, religion, the Catholic religion, and I thought, he's no fine tale to tell me after what he's associated with. And then I thought, the whole Catholic Church is intertwined with the whole damn thing.
In 1993, Steve, when we moved into this property, we'd been in it less than a week. The girls will remember, with 4 girls, and there's a knock on the door, and it's Reverend Tom Willis. If anybody listening wants to Google this guy, He was the Exorcist, and they made TV programs about him. And he lived in Bridlington, but he were based in Hull. And he come to tell me that he'd heard new people had moved into the property, which was us. And he'd like to bless the house because he'd been there before. And, you know, and I regret not actually speaking to him more. I asked him to leave when he got to top bedroom, which is now Bob Brown's bedroom, because I've converted this big property into 3 flats. And Bob's had lots of strange experiences up there. And he just said, I discourage your children from sleeping in that room. And I looked, and my eldest daughter, Sarah, stood behind him. So I asked him to leave politely, you know, really nice to the guy. You know, we weren't trying to be offensive. But yeah, the church is entrenched in it. We call it a belief system, but they know that this what we're looking into is very real. So to discourage you and tell you to stop,
they've attempted to try and cover up and mask many things, haven't they, Barry?
Oh yeah. You know, I hear tell of these people that do allegedly come and tell people to stop doing this and all the rest, and the talk of these guys and their black anoraks and fedora hats appearing on the scene and warning them. You know, I would happily have a conversation with them and invite them into the garage and close the door down, where I've got plenty of things that I can beat them to the ground into submission to confess everything they need.
I think the extra camera means Les might have a few questions before we close down. Have we, Les?
Yeah, and I really will be beaten to the ground if I don't get some of these questions out, guys. Yeah, because the audience out
fabulous. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah,
honestly,
really
enjoyed it.
They just rely on me to get these questions to you guys. So I'll start off by I'll just nip into one from Nathaniel J. Gillis, a good friend of the show. If you're still on with us, Nathaniel, the question is. Let's have a look, see if we can bring that up. So I know you've talked about it earlier, guys, early part of the stream, of whether it's a malevolent or benevolent beings. But in general, I guess Nathaniel is asking, does the phenomenon represent a threat to our species in the whole, you know?
In one answer, yes.
Yeah, I'll give it a yes, yeah. Is he still on, Nathaniel? It's a pity we haven't got a link. I mean, I know you two guys know Nathaniel, don't you? And he's got a lot of interesting stuff to say.
Yeah,
so,
I don't know.
Sorry, it was short but sweet, Nathaniel. So let's move on.
Yeah, we'll go on to let's have a look then. Right, here's a good one from Richie White. I've heard some stories where they believe the craft is actually alive. Anybody heard of that? So you was talking about that earlier, Steve, weren't you?
Yeah, I know a few cases where the craft is seen alive. I mean, you know, many years ago when I worked, I got into, after leaving school, though I was well into the subject by when I left school, 1983, did my first investigation in Liverpool. But, you know, I was trying to work out, as in, because I never thought this was ever going to come to a career. No longer was there. But I thought, okay, well, let's get into doing something. So I became an engineer, telecommunications, electronics, and all that sort of thing. Followed my dad's path, really, because he'd done the same thing. And then I ended up, I was a contractor for NATO, and I worked at RAF Weatherfields in Essex in telecommunications. And I worked there for a while, and I was part of a program which was working on racking systems holding computer data boards, which are linked to satellites. It was a Marconi and NATO project at the time, and I signed 2 Official Secrets Acts, as you normally would do anyway. But what was really interesting is one of the guys I was working with used to nickname them bio boards, and this is 28, 29 years ago, something like that. And these boards had biological circuits on them. They had biological plasma cells. The memory cells were liquid plasma, biological liquid plasma. And I thought, wow, this is really amazing stuff, you know. Let's talk about nearly 30 years ago now. And we'd seal them into the racking systems, and they're automated. They communicate with 3 non-listed satellites as big as a football field in orbit. I guess that they probably are national security, well, communication, national security communication devices, and they were automated. But when I looked at them, I had to take it on board. Yeah, they had biological circuits on them 30 years ago. And I never talked about it until I read an article about maybe 5 years ago that IBM are going to be releasing and utilizing some of these biological plasma cells. And I thought, oh, okay, well, now it's coming out, I'll talk about it, and did. And it's surprising, there's quite a few other people have come across things like this, biological circuits being used in, many years ago, but everything gets held back out of the public domain for many, many years. I mean, I'm not even my computer has that now, and I'm going to state-of-the-art computers, so we're still waiting on that sort of technology. But people, yes, I've interviewed a few people regarding their experiences with craft, some of which are seemingly alive, or they have an intelligence of the whereabouts of themselves. And that was demonstrated years ago when Ingo Swann was doing remote viewing for some of the military and the US government. And he said on one occasion, the craft's aware of me. It's as if it's conscious, and then there are other occasions where some of these things are just crafts and they have occupants, and it's a different ball game. But it's hard to tell the difference at first glance. But I'd say there's definitely some evidence to support that some of these things have a real kind of living intelligence to them.
I would agree. Absolutely. The first website, 2002, was ILF UFO, Intelligent Life Forms, because myself and Steve Ashbridge, we firmly believed that these lights, and there could have been something structured behind them. I can't say that there wasn't, but these, once again, orange spheres sent to be aware of us. You lifted the camera and the bloody thing switched off. You know what? You put your equipment away and they presented.
Yeah.
So an awareness, and all good. Okay. Any views, Barry?
Nope, I'm exactly the same. So we're all singing from the same hymn sheet. Yeah.
Okay, let's.
Right. We're just going to bring. Super chat came in tonight. Thank you very much from Remington Pike Beast Lee. What a panel tonight. I can watch it all night. So if you've got another spare few hours, guys, we'll just run till midnight.
No, it's been great, honestly. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you, Lee, for that. So I guess what time we've got? 3 minutes on the clock.
3 minutes. If we've no questions, I'm interested. How can we break the stigma that's attached to the subject? Can we?
Well, we're a constant battle about fighting wrong information, illusions, disinformation. We're always. Do you know what? I'm not shy, and Barry's not. We'll call it out. We always have done. Some people don't like us for that. Fine, but it is what it is. At the end of the day, I can't spend. And Barry's the same. All this time, all these years in this subject, to just nod your head and say, "Yeah, I agree." If you have a difference of opinion and you can prove it, something fine. Let people know, because we can't stay in the position we are forever. We've got to educate people. People need to be aware. But the thing is, they can be aware. It's not impossible. I think they've just got blinkers on and they've lost touch with their own realities. And it's easy to get lost in the world of chaos that we live in. But that's perfect ground for these things. And that's the problem. And that's sometimes is a headway for them gaining the win, because simply we live in a world where we keep our heads down and ignore the world around us. Luckily Barry lives in Ireland, and but some people live in stone cities, and a completely lost connection with their environment. I think people need to do that. Because some of the answers are there, but it is difficult, and I can't, it's the stigma attached to it, and the amount of rubbish over the internet that's taking people in complete lies and disinformation. You kind of get used to it. You kind of start seeing and prodding at it. You start to see the holes in things, but you have to spend the years in it, Paul, like you and me and Barry. We have to spend the years in that to see and recognize those holes now. But I often think to myself, I shake my head sometimes and I think, why do people get so much acknowledgement for the rubbish they talk about? And that is simply because we're dealing with that information is going out and being read by people that are not educated enough and make the wrong decisions or believe the wrong things. And that's the biggest problem. We're always battling a tidal wave of disinformation and inaccuracy. Maybe some of it is done on purpose to keep us looking in the opposite direction. But yeah, it's a big question, and it's not easy to deal with. You just have to constantly keep chipping at it.
Well, you know what the answer is there, Steve. Just keep off Twitter.
Right.
Yeah,
We've got a minute left, so let's just go full circle. The Awakening, the dates.
Dates of Awakening is August the 25th. It starts around about, doors open on the Friday, which is for the VIP at 4 o'clock, and it goes right through the Saturday and Sunday, the 25th of August to the 27th of August. And there's details up on the Facebook about under Awakening Expo or Conscious Life Expo. We also got all the details up on phenomenamagazine.co.uk. Just scroll across to Awakening Expo. 3 days event, full on. Too many to list. People turning up. But what's good about it is that there's a lot of new information that's being shared this year, and I like to see that we're going in that right direction. So that's good.
Barry,
Brilliant.
Steve, 2 hours of your time. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. I've not done anything. It's been great. Thank you. It's been down to you guys.
Yeah.
I'm going to end it there. I'll hand over to Les. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I got to apologise for not getting all the questions out tonight. I hope you don't give me a hard time next week over it, but we will have a live stream next week. On that note, we are saying goodbye. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.